Welcome in, welcome in. Friday night means it's time for DFS Chalk Talk, brought to you by Triple Play Fantasy. We get after it right after this. Oh, yes, indeed. It's time to get out of that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans. I'm your host, Jeff Mesha. We are here on a Friday, and you know I never do this alone. I got my boys here. Mikey to my right on the screen, to your left. What's going on in Nebraska, my friend?
Hey, man, same old thing. Corn's not growing. It's too damn hot for even that. Buy stock in corn. That's something I can tell everybody with pretty good confidence.
Well, perfect, and I'll couple that with Corn the band, because that's my favorite band. So, and as Joe knows, that is my favorite band. What's going on in Connecticut there, Joseph?
I'll tell you what. Good to see you guys as always. We're 1 week closer, and you guys can take your stock and put it in corn. I'm going to put it in Jordan Love, because breaking news: the Packers are giving Mr. Love a 4-year extension at $220 million, which will officially make Jordan Love makes him the highest paid QB in the history of the National Football League.
Nice.
Just in case you were wondering if he could pay for dinner tomorrow night with cash, that's a $75 million guaranteed signing bonus.
Wow.
Ooh. I'll tell you, with the last name Love, you know who you need is Brother Love from the WWF back in the day, just to say, I love you, and take you out to dinner like Joe said. That's a throwback. In any case, if you haven't joined us before, we get into all things DFS. Obviously, it's the preseason, and we're kind of getting into our who you would select, who you would not select, kind of who you stay away from. Last week we got into quarterbacks, and we had a little bit of a different, who you might stay away from, who might get drafted later on in the draft, kind of thing. This week we're talking about who our favorites are, and giving cases as far as that's concerned. And we have a couple of them each. So I'll start. Before the show started, we were getting into it, and my two quarterbacks are C.J. Stroud and Kyler Murray, and I was attempting to make a strong case for Kyler Murray because I thought he was going to have a bounce-back season. He's got Marvin Harrison Jr. He's really got a nice lineup in front of him with Trey McBride and James Conner. And then I started doing the research into Kyler Murray, and I realized, well, geez, since his rookie year in 2019, he has gone from starting 16 games to 16 games to 14 games to 11 games to 8 games, seemingly can't stay healthy, has never thrown over 3,900 yards, and has never rushed for more than 6.2 yards per attempt, which you think a guy with that kind of speed might break out a little bit more. The case I was trying to make doesn't seem to be coming to fruition. I don't know what you guys, what your thoughts are on Kyler Murray. I was going strong into this because of the breakout of Trey McBride, and because of the addition of Marvin Harrison Jr. and the potential that kid has. I think he's going to be strong still. But, man, I tell you, Kyler Murray, his health and everything else, the case I was going to make for him fell apart quickly. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, that's one guy that I've never really gotten behind. I've never really felt like Kyler Murray is like that guy, the guy that you really want to have as your fantasy quarterback. Now, he has good runs. I mean, he has 4 or 5 week periods where he gets those points. Then he goes these like long dry patches too, where he has real bad games. He gets you like a 3 to 5 point margin somewhere in there, fumbles, lots of interceptions, things like that. So you take away a lot of the weapons that they used to have on that team, and now you add it into it with youth, with Trey McBride, and you've got Marvin Harrison Jr., of course. But I mean, they even lost Hollywood Brown a couple of seasons ago, and then they just lost. I can't remember who they lost just this year, but I mean, it just keeps getting worse and worse for that team. And again, if Marvin Harrison can come out there and be great, that would be awesome. But I just, that's ifs, and I just can't really get behind Kyler Murray this year.
Yeah, and before we get into your opinion, Joe, coupling off of what Mike just said as far as passing yards, last year he did not throw more than 262 yards in a game. He had 3 touchdowns in one game, but outside, so one game he had 3 touchdowns. One other game he had 2. The rest of them he had 1 or 0. So it was once for 3, once for 2, and the rest were 0. And then rushing wise, he didn't rush for more than 33 yards in a game last year. Granted, he only started 8 games, but I guess to Mike's point, you really can't count on him, I suppose, anymore. It seems like. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, it was a flash in the pan. Kyler Murray for 18 to 24 months a couple of years back. He had DeAndre Hopkins, right, for the first year or 2 he was there.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were scoring some points, and they were, a pleasant surprise. That team has gone completely in the opposite direction. He doesn't even really pass the eye test anymore from like an accuracy perspective. I'll say this, and you're going to hear it from me when we talk about these guys more. Like, I will eat the apple with these rushing quarterbacks strictly from a fantasy perspective. Kyler Murray has the unique ability to have a damage control game where he can look like a complete and utter shit throwing the ball. But if he goes for 60 rushing yards and a touchdown, you've saved your fantasy day from it being a complete disaster. So that separates him to me. But if we're talking about being in the top 10, and there's just too many question marks around that team now. But it was funny, though, because even when he came back last year, he showed you a couple pockets. And I'll say people will come around him fast. He has one big game or he starts to look good. And from a fantasy perspective, everybody's going to get on that train. So, I believe he'd be a good second QB to have, understanding that you're going to keep your finger on the beat of the trade pulse with him, because if you can trade him after one good game, get some elevated value there, that's probably the thing that intrigues me the most about having him on my roster.
But I think you're right. It's a bit of fool's gold. And you brought up rushing quarterbacks, Joe. I know you've got a couple on your list. Let's get into the first one on your list as far as rushing quarterbacks are concerned.
Yeah, I'm going to go. It's just so funny how much I dislike this guy. But I'm going to go Lamar Jackson, Baltimore. I'm just so sick of him fantasy-wise. And the Baltimore Ravens, a very easy team to be sick of. But, my gosh, you just can't ignore. So, first of all, he may be the most motivated player in the NFL going into the season this year with the way their season ended last year. So I think there's something there. Then you got the fact that, I'll go right back to the argument. His passing game and that Raven passing game can, and at times, will be a complete abomination. And I don't even know if that's a word, but I'll create a new one for how horrible that offense can look sometimes. And from a statistic perspective, which is all we're really trying to get from this guy, how bad they can just look like they're in a real funk. But Lamar Jackson, he had only 7 games under 20 points last year. So he went 10-7. So if you're talking about a super flex, you got 2 QBs in a typical scoring league. In my mind, I'm thinking to myself, so 20, if I can get 20 as like that average and hit that line for my second QB most weeks, I'm going to be happy with that split. And with Lamar Jackson, you got a really good chance of getting 20 because of the way they still run the ball. 8 out of 17 games last year, he had over 50 yards rushing. And here's one key. They lost both Gus Edwards and Dobbins. And the one thing with Gus Edwards, mother, son of a bitch, will steal touchdowns like insert horribly and politically correct jokes here. But he will steal touchdowns from a quarterback like no other. So I'm intrigued to see without him what that does for Lamar.
Well, and before I get Mike's opinion on this, I will say, who steals touchdowns a lot is Derrick Henry. So, and I get it. They got rid of Dobbins and Edwards, but they got Derrick Henry. So you want to talk about taking away from Lamar's rushing. perhaps they're figuring him more into the passing offense a little bit. I mean, he's going to get his yardage, no doubt, but the addition of Derrick Henry, I have to think, is going to take away a little bit, certainly from his goal, like the 2-3 yard line kind of post, and maybe even just yards overall. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, no, they added the vulture when they added Derrick Henry for sure. But that's also a team, like, I feel like if you can get outside contain on Lamar Jackson, you can pretty much isolate them to that offense that Joe's talking about. You know, if you get outside contain, if you can keep him within the tackles, Lamar Jackson is not that good of a quarterback. He has to think too much. He doesn't get to be able to get on the fly and be able to look down the field and things like that. So I feel like any team starts seeing those replays and things like that, you're going to start seeing a lot more stacked outside Mike linebacker looks. I really think Baltimore's a team that you can really shut down pretty quick. Offensively, anyways. Defensively, man, they're stout. So they're going to keep in games, but it's going to be more games that are won by Justin Tucker, I think, than are won by Lamar Jackson. Well,
there you go. And speaking of quarterbacks that are maybe number 2, 1 out of 2 on our list this week, Mike, who you got maybe that's good, but runner up to who you got?
Well, it's Kirk Cousins, man. This guy never gets any love. This guy always has great, phenomenal seasons. He doesn't throw a whole lot of interceptions. You know, the guy likes to force a lot of balls down the ground or down the field. But I feel like this might be the very best setup that this guy has ever had as a quarterback. Justin Jefferson, greatest football player in the league. But then once you get past him, you kind of have a mediocre TJ Hawkinson and a mediocre Jordan Addison. Well, now you got Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is a monster. Kyle Pitts is a freak of nature when you look at his metrics. We haven't seen it a lot, but he has never had a quarterback. Now that he has Kirk Cousins sitting out there, we may get to see a very different Kyle Pitts. And in fact, I'm very high on Kyle Pitts this year. Bijan Robinson is a stud, and Kirk Cousins loves to dump it out to that running back. So I feel like with Bijan Robinson being able to get that outlet pass, it reminds me of early days Dalvin Cook. And so you're going to have a lot of production and volume coming off of that team. And then Drake London is amazing. He's very fast. He gets good separation. So, I mean, I feel like Kirk Cousins and that line, the line could be better, but it also could be worse. It's a middle of the pack offensive line. So I think we give that all those things. The recipe for Kirk Cousins to have yet another 4,000 plus season, which he's had, I think, like 10 out of 12, by the way, and another 30 touchdown season, which he's had like 12, by the way. I feel like he could easily finish as a quarterback 1. Is he a top 10? Probably not. But is he top 12? I think he can be. I think he can edge out that quarterback 1 position in the 11 or 12 spot this year. And so when you're getting him in the 6th, 7th round of drafts, give it to me. I'll take Kirk Cousins as my quarterback 1 with that instance.
I listen. Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
I love how he has rewritten I don't even want to say the word narrative, because I feel like narrative, you can think manipulation. He has organically rewritten his whole career and the perception of it. And it's for the better. I got to give that guy a lot of credit. He's going to be one of those guys where when you're looking at QBs and historically, it's going to be everybody's going to see his name and be like, oh my God, do you remember him? He had some crazy years. And remember when they gave him the 4 years for $80 million and it was like blowing Peyton Manning's salary out of the water? Cousins has just been through some really interesting things. And I got to, again, just give him props how he has rewritten the story of his career for a positive. Why are you guys laughing at me?
Well, I'm laughing because you know what? Kirk Cousins should be a financial advisor because, yes, is he a good football player? He has parlayed his position and how mediocre. Now, Mike puts up a lot of stats, which are nice, and I'm wondering if you didn't have another quarterback in there, they couldn't put up the same numbers with the same players that they had. In any case, this should be an interesting season. But what I will say is the Falcons didn't draft Michael Penix Jr. for no reason. I think the first slip up or the first potential injury from Cousins, they're going to slip in Penix Jr. and just kind of see where the rookie goes because he's got a ton of potential. And I just don't know if I necessarily want to have a higher draft pick on a guy like that because of the X factor there, I guess. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Mike.
I like Penix Jr. I think he is good, but I agree with you. They probably wouldn't, but you have to draft a quarterback. If your quarterback's 35 years old, you have to draft a quarterback. You've got to be prepared because, I mean, that's not old by my standards. God, I wish I was still 35. But by quarterback standards, that's pretty damn old, you know? So, I mean, you got to really have a good backup plan in place. I don't think you're going to see too many calls for Penix Jr. when you get like I said, Kirk Cousins, man, he can sling the rock. The guy's, like I said, 4,500 yards almost every single season. Give it to me. Come on, Kirk
Well,
Cousins.
I think Mike purposefully pronounced his name Penix Jr. instead of Penix on purpose to make it sound worse than it is, especially coming from guys, from the three of us who have a combined age of 129. So yes, we're going to be older than 35. So in any case, I told you we'll have a better option than the three we just named. So the first one that I'm going to go with, and I'll let you guys take yours after that, but I'm going with C.J. Stroud. This guy, rookie season, was just a freaking monster. 4108 for yardage, 23 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. 3 of those interceptions came in one game. This guy's an absolute monster. And when you think about what the Texans did, where they turned around, they got into the playoffs, and then all of a sudden you have additions like Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon, and even, I mean, I'll say it, Cam Akers. I get it, that's not a huge addition, but he did start for the Rams last year. This Houston team is poised to be huge. If Stroud can throw 4108 to Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Noah Brown, he certainly can do probably more than that if we add in Stephon Diggs and Robert Woods. He's not exactly the rushing quarterback. He only had 167 yards rushing last year and 3 rushing TDs. He's not going to get it done on the ground, but this guy can get it done through the air, and I think he's going to be a monster this year. Your thoughts?
Well, I'll tell you what. I think you made a lot of good points in general with Stroud in Houston, and I think it's probably the most compelling, for Aaron Rodgers. But after Aaron Rodgers, when you really get down to football, these first few games for Houston is going to be as compelling as it gets with the way they ended that season. You add Diggs. They're loaded. They're loaded up, and they're the trendy. Like how for like 10 years, everybody was like the Raiders this year. They're coming back, man. It's the Raiders, and the Lions too had that for so long, but it was a bunch of bullshit. This is actually, they might be on track, Houston, to really just knock this rebuild out of the park. And obviously it starts with Stroud. And even like you said, though, like Cam Akers, like all these additions, man, you are building, they're honing in on those little holes that hurt. How'd they lose their season last season? A backup running back fumbled what? Remember at the end of that playoff game? So what do? You bring in a veteran like Cam Akers. He's been on. So they really feel like they're hitting the mark on hitting the mistakes from last year and filling whatever those gaps are. I'm excited for them.
But something tells me Mike disagrees based on our conversation this week. Mikey.
So I feel like Stephon Diggs adds a certain aspect to the locker room that just isn't good, and I feel like he actually is a reason why Josh Allen had quite a few interceptions over the past couple of years. Is because if you don't feed him the ball constantly, he will make your life a living hell in that locker room. And so I think that life of being a living hell, you actually start really trying to force feed targets to that guy just to shut him up, because the squeaky wheel typically does get the grease. And I think that's going to add to some of the CJ Stroud's interceptions. I think it's going to add a different dynamic to that locker room. I think the thing that the Texans had going for them is that nobody knew what they were about. Nobody knew what they had. They had speed on both ends, and they were really good with Nico Collins, Noah Brown, Tank Dell. I mean, even Devin Singletary was getting in on the mix there. That team was already, I think, primed to be a really good team. And I think the addition to Joe Mixon is epic. That's going to be huge for them. I think adding Joe Mixon onto that team, and even Cam Akers is still good. And Stephon Diggs is a great receiver. I'm not trying to take anything away from him. I just think the dynamic he adds to the locker room is detrimental to a team. And I think that it's going to really hurt, especially a young quarterback like Stroud.
Point taken. And piggybacking off that, Mike, who you got as far as your second pick is concerned?
My second pick's Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow got hurt last year. he's always been one of those guys that's got, on the upper echelon of quarterbacks. He's still got Jamar Chase. He's still got T. Higgins. And Mike Gesicki at your tight end, you probably do a little bit better than that. Zach Moss at your running back position, you could probably do a little bit better than that. But what that also tells you is that they're not going to be able to run the ball very effectively. If Zach Moss is your running back one, not to take anything away from Zach Moss is a great running back too, right? He's a great backup running back to have on your team. But if you're kicking him out as your starter every single game, I feel like you're a little bit behind the curve there as far as running backs go. So I think that's going to really open things up for that passing game. I think they're going to have to rely on that pass a lot harder. I think that defense didn't really take too many steps in this offseason, although I think that defense is still fairly solid. I think they're going to be giving up points. I think you're going to see this team in a lot of shootouts. And so I think Joe Burrow is going to be a great pick. I think he's going to be fine this whole entire season. I think he could give you at least 4,500 yards, at least 30 touchdowns. I think he should be a solid grab. And another guy you're grabbing at the 4th, 5th round. So,
and I agree with you 100%. The only thing I question, and I think we probably all question, is just can he stay healthy? If he can't stay healthy, those numbers Mike said are exactly what he's going to put up. It's just, I guess we'll see. We'll wait and see what happens. Joe, who you got as far as second pick is concerned?
So, it's Jalen Hurts. To be honest, Jalen's probably. I think I probably went a little backwards there. I think my second is Lamar. I've got all the faith in the world in Jalen Hurts. He is my guy. You look at the stats. He only had 2 games last year under 20 fantasy points. Relative to your basic scoring. I'm not saying every league it looks like that, but one of our leagues only 2. So I mean, right off the bat, you're penciling. And that was a broken team the second half of the year. Self-proclaimed. They're talking about it now. They're talking about building on their chemistry now. So this was a broken team the second half of the year, yet this guy was scoring fantasy points like they were going out of style. I think they're going to be better. They're going to be more focused this year. He had 4 games over 30, and he had rushing TDs in 11 out of 16. I don't count their last game. He didn't really play that much against the Giants. So rushing TDs in 11 out of 16. I just feel like, again, if you're in a super flex, you got 2 guys, you got to think in your head, man, I'd really like to feel good about penciling in 45 to 50 a week in these 2 super flex spots. And I think having, I don't think I'd put all my eggs in the rushing quarterback basket. A lot of risk, a lot of injury risk. But when you talk about a Lamar or a Jalen, couple others maybe that run like that, those rushing points are just so valuable, and there's nowhere else to get them like that other than the QB position.
And I wholeheartedly agree. And out of the 6 that we mentioned, if I'm going to pick 2, I'm going to go with Joe's great points on Jalen Hurts and take Joe Burrow, assuming he stays healthy. I think those are the 2 top notch. I don't know who you guys go with.
Real quick, ground us real quick. Yeah. Give us all 6 real quick that were, just so everybody's on this. Who are the 6 that we're looking at now?
So I had Kyler Murray, C.J. Stroud, Joseph.
And then I had Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson.
And I
Michael.
had Kirk Cousins and Joe Burrow. A Burrow.
So of those, like I said, I think you made a great point on Jalen Hurts, and I don't think anybody can argue against that. Mike's points on Joe Burrow, perfect. The only thing is, does he stay healthy? Let's hope that he does. If he does, I think he's putting up huge points. What do you guys think?
Yep, I like Hurts and Burrow here too. That's actually the 2 guys that I feel like stuck out on this list. Again, we're looking at ADP past the first round in Superflex leagues. I guess in some Superflex leagues you're seeing Hurts and a few of these guys go earlier. But I think still worth a grab. I still think if Hurts is going to be your quarterback 1, you're going to be a pretty happy guy. I think same with Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I really I know it's Allen and it's Mahomes and it's Aaron Rodgers are probably the other 3 we didn't talk about. But I kind of like. I mean, Mahomes the best quarterback in the NFL. They're going to win a lot of games. But strict fantasy wise, I think I roll with the guys we're talking about in totality of the whole ranking list. I'm struggling. You guys made great points. I will play off myself with Jalen Hurts. I do believe in him wholeheartedly. My last couple seasons of teams have sunk or swam with Hurts' performance. I'm battling with you 2 guys here. I like Burrow, but C.J. Stroud is hard to ignore too. So I'm putting Jalen Hurts out there with you guys. I'm going back and forth because I feel like I could give a real passion for Stroud, but I think Joe Burrow, if you're going for Jalen Hurts and you're going to have some home runs with him, maybe you have a couple clunkers, but not too many. A consistent and healthy Joe Burrow is basically netting you 25 fantasy points a week. And as long as he stays healthy, you pencil me in for that. I love that. I think Hurts and Burrow, that's a hell of a combo. And I don't think you're killing yourself draft-wise with Burrow. So I think you might even be in a situation where, you're getting Burrow, letting some other, fool's gold go by, and maybe saving yourself somewhere else from a draft equity perspective.
Should be interesting. There's obviously still plenty of time until the first draft start. We got at least a few weeks before everybody starts kind of getting into it, and we're still in July now, but it definitely makes for interesting conversation. With that, we'll wrap up this week. Well, there we go. And we only care about fantasy season, Joe. I don't really give a shit about the Texans playing the Bengals with Mike McCarthy at quarterback. Nobody cares. So, in any case, but stick with us as always. Friday nights, DFS Chalk Talk. Any parting words there, boys?
Just enjoy your weekend, folks, and just only a few more weeks till football. A few, several, whatever.
So we got you. We got you, Joey Burrow, Jalen Hurts tonight. Next week we will be giving you the running back breakdown.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Until next time, we got you covered.